What's up, everybody? Laura Sanko here, and I just want to wish you guys a happy new year. 2023 is here. It kind of came fast, if I'm being honest with you, but I am so excited for this year. I wanted to put together just a really quick video, my top 3 fights I'm looking forward to next year. These are not fights that have already been scheduled, so I'm not going to talk about how crazy excited I am for Islam Makhachev versus Alex Volkanovski. Not going to talk about that one. However, I'm going to talk about some fights that I think are real possibilities this year, and I think that they would be amazing matchups for a variety of reasons. When I was thinking about what I wanted to put in this video, I was kind of going through the fights that are possibilities in my mind, and I got to tell you something. There's so many more that I could have put on this list, so I'm going to have some honorable mentions, but the point being, there is a lot to look forward to in 2023. So number one, listen, it's the fight. It's the obvious one. I had to put it on the list. It's Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou. Now, this one is so huge to me for a lot of different reasons. One of the biggest, obviously, is how long it's been since we saw Jon Jones. It's been 3 years since we saw Jon inside the octagon. And before that, of course, as we all know, he spent 9 years at the top of the light heavyweight division. Now, I know he got his title stripped in 2016, but point being, top of the division where he was champion or stripped champion, whatever, 9 years straight at the top of the light heavyweight division. He cleared it out. Now he's moving on up to heavyweight. And if anybody's been paying attention on Instagram, he is bodied up. He is absolutely huge. And I think I read something that he's weighing in like 254, something around there. So like a sizable, real heavyweight. However, when you think about how unstoppable Jon seemed, except for the Dominic Reyes fight, it seemed kind of stoppable there. But in general, just how unstoppable Jon seemed. He never faced a power puncher, even in the realm of Francis Ngannou. Of course, he faced guys that hit really hard. I'm not saying that he didn't, but they're just not on the same level as Francis Ngannou. Now, on the other side of things, you've got Francis Ngannou, who's been off for about a year now. All the interesting machinations with his contract, the Champions Clause, exactly when does his contract end? And is the UFC exercising these clauses that will keep him around for one more fight? I think it happens. I do think that the UFC is going to either be able to pay him enough or contractually obligate him to have at least one more fight in the UFC. And, for the fans' sake, I hope it happens. I hope Francis is also happy with the situation the money gets. But regardless, we want to see that fight. Because on the flip side of things, Francis Ngannou hasn't faced a tactician like Jon Jones. Now, if this fight had been talked about more than a year ago, I think I really would have favored Jon. I don't want to say heavily because of the size difference, but I would have favored Jon in the fight. Now, having seen Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gane, an excellent tactician, an excellent counter striker, it adds another layer of things for us to think about and talk about. We have no idea what what Jon's cardio is going to be like at heavyweight. But again, if you pay attention to social media, the man's working out like crazy. So that matchup has to happen. I think it'd be the biggest fight of 2023, maybe the biggest fight of the last few years. It's a massive, massive pay-per-view. God, I hope it happens. All right. Another massive potential maybe not a pay-per-view because it wouldn't be for a title fight. Regardless, huge fight. I want to see Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor. Now, I know that this fight has been talked about quite a bit, so it's not like some huge mystery, but it was kind of talked about a lot. And then Dana's like, no, we're not doing that. Or he was like, no, we haven't started those discussions yet, at least. So it kind of fell off the table a little bit. But regardless, this to me is the fight to bring Conor McGregor back. It makes a lot of sense. On one hand, you've got Michael Chandler, who has clearly been raising his hand to fight Conor McGregor, who is, regardless of who he's fighting, an exciting fighter. Michael Chandler is one of those guys that could have a red stripe a mile long on his Tapology, and I would still tune in to watch him fight every single time because A, he's been competitive in a lot of those fights, and B, a lot of those fights have been fight of the year candidates. So even though he's taken some losses, who freaking cares? The man can entertain and he can compete, and he's kind of at the right level for Conor to come back against. I don't want to see Conor come back and get a title shot. I think that there's no way that they could do that. I really don't. It would be ludicrous. But coming back and having a meaningful fight against Michael Chandler, which it would be because it would still be in the top tier of that division, I think would be a good one. But then when I say that division, I'm like, yeah, but what division am I talking about? Because by the looks of him, Conor McGregor, listen, I could be a carny in another life, because once you're around MMA for a while, you're really good at guessing people's weights, or at least getting close. He's got to be weighing 190 to 195, which tells me that this fight, if it happens, would probably take place at welterweight, which is fine. I think Michael Chandler would be fine with that. I mean, Michael Chandler cuts a lot of weight as well. He's shorter, of course, but man, he's bodied up. Stylistically, this is a great fight for Conor McGregor, and that's what he needs in this type of situation. I think he's going to feel good having a little bit of a size advantage, maybe a lot of a size advantage. I think he's going to feel good that Michael Chandler is the type of guy that's going to come forward. It needs to be a fight that feels good for Conor, that feels good to the fans. Michael Chandler wants it. Let's make that one happen. That would be absolutely massive. And then lastly, another obvious one. I'm sorry, I'm picking low-hanging fruit. I can't help it. Khamzat Chimaev versus Colby Covington. Do I even need to explain that one? We haven't seen Colby fight, since he beat Jorge Masvidal, settled the feud there, I guess, sort of, because then they continued it in the streets a little bit later. And then you've got Khamzat Chimaev, who, had this rocket ship trajectory, had the incredibly tough, close fight with Gilbert Burns that showed us all that, there's a little bit of humanity in him. I'm not going to say he's got chinks in the armor, but, the cardio, the decision-making really was the big one in that fight. I want to see him face another wrestler. And I want to see Colby Covington come back and face one of the scariest guys in the division, because I think Colby's got the cardio that could really give Chimaev some real deal problems. That one is an absolutely fascinating fight. I love that Khamzat was able to fight Kevin Holland. I'm glad that fight took place, but to be honest with everybody, that fight didn't really mean that much. It was, if you remember the jumble of, what was that? I can't even remember. Was that 270? I don't remember. I can never remember the numbers, but regardless, the card that was a complete cluster F. He ended up fighting Kevin Holland, darsed him in the first couple minutes. So not an overly competitive fight, not really the fight we wanted to see. We want to see Khamzat Chimaev versus Colby Covington. I feel like that has to happen this year. So those are my top three. I got to give you guys a couple of honorable mentions, though, because these, I had a really hard time not putting them on the list as well. We got Zhang Weili versus Valentina Shevchenko. I love this one for a lot of reasons. Zhang Weili, absolutely massive for the strawweight division. Valentina Shevchenko, I know, as we all know, has basically cleared out the division. Now, there are still some sort of interesting fights for Valentina. I wouldn't mind seeing the rematch with Taila Santos. In fact, that's another one I have on my honorable mentions list. I think as close as that fight was, and as much trouble as Taila gave Valentina, I think that could be a really interesting, sellable fight. But the fight to make is Zhang Weili versus Valentina Shevchenko. I'm here for that one all day long. And then lastly, you got to get Aljo versus Henry Cejudo. That fight would be massive for the bantamweight division. Is Henry Cejudo coming back? I think he is. When will it be? No freaking clue. But to match the size and the wrestling of Aljo versus, the greatness of Henry Cejudo, is he still great, though, after all this time away? I would argue probably yes. He's been coaching. He's been training. This hasn't been like party time for him. That's a fascinating matchup. And just imagine a world where they put Sean O'Malley versus Chito Vera 2 on the same card, maybe as the co-main event. That would be a bantamweight buffet of delight. And I hope it happens. Not that I don't want Sean to get a title fight, because I love Sean. I think he's great, but I don't know. These are the matchups I see. These are the ones I'm excited about. Those are my thoughts. If you guys have other fights that jump out to you, fights you really want to see in 2023, drop them in the comments. Hit subscribe. Guys, we got a really great year ahead of us. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.